Hi there, this is Trisha, and today I'm going to show you how to create this sweet Christmas window using art impression stamps. I created 2 cards using Gina K Designs cardstock, ink, and stamps. I used a Stampin' Up! Embossing folder to create the wood background. Let me show you the art impression stamps we're going to use for this project. First, we're going to be using the window from the WC Series 5 Set 1, the small vine from the foliage set, this branch from the blooming birdhouse, and the small fir top from the fir tree set. Let's get started. First, we're going to ink up the window with the sepia. Now I want to make sure I get all of the little panes, and I'm leaving off the top of the bottom of this window, the little flower box, because what I want to happen is I want to put my greens in there and my leaves, and I want them to look like they're overflowing without any lines on the top of that window box. So right now I'm going to take my paintbrush and dip it in some water and pinch it off, and now I'm just going to start by pulling the color right out of those lines. And I'm pulling it into the middle of each of those areas. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create a 3D look. So I want to pull from the bottom up and the sides in, and I want to leave the middle of that window box really light. I'm going to come in here in a few minutes with some additional sepia, and I'm going to make it a little bit darker. So right now, I'm just concerned with pulling just a little bit of the color out of the lines. Those 2 middle parts I want to really kind of pop out at you, so I'm trying to make them lighter than the window box itself. So I'm just, like I said, just pulling some color out of those lines. Now I'm adding some more water to my brush, and I'm going to start pulling the color out of the top of this window. Now I'm not really being careful here. I want to just get a light layer of color, still keeping within each of those sections, but I'm not being careful not to get in the middle of them. I'm going to come in with some darker colors and really emphasize the parts of those window panes that I want to be the darkest. So right now I'm just kind of pulling the color into the middle of those window panes, or the wood. I want this to look like wood, a wood window frame. So I'm just quickly pulling the color right out. So as you can see, this is pretty quick right now. So I'm taking the sepia marker, and I'm using the fine point, and I'm drawing in some squiggly lines. I want this to look like wood, so I'm just kind of randomly drawing some lines from the top and the bottom just to give the idea of wood. This doesn't have to be precise. It just, a few squiggly lines are going to make a big impact. And I'm just darkening the sides of those little pieces of wood that stick out in the front. So now I'm just going to go into those front pieces and add a couple of squiggly lines in there just to finish that off. Now I'm going to take my brush, and I'm just going to soften those lines. I don't want them to look like they're drawn in. I want them to kind of be part of the watercolor painting here. So I'm just adding a very small amount of water just to kind of soften the lines. Then I'll once again take my marker, and I'm going to draw the lines up into the frame of the window frame. So I'm darkening those lines underneath just to really make that top piece of wood really prominent. And then I'm just drawing just a few lines here and there. And then I'll draw a few lines on the window panes themselves. And I'm going to darken in a few areas as well. So this is just going to add a little more interest to the painting, and really going to emphasize that, you know, this frame is a wood frame. I think it's these little touches that really bring your paintings to life. Create something different. So now I'll darken in some of those, just the top and the left-hand side of each one of those panes, just to give it a little more depth, so it really looks three-dimensional. And if you watch any of my other videos, you'll see I do this a lot. I'll go in with my fine tip and really darken up some of those lines. And just a couple more, and we'll move on to the next step. I'm going to actually take my paintbrush now, after I finish darkening all those areas that I want to darken. I'm going to put a little bit of this color on my palette, so that when I come back in, I'm going to add some of that sepia. I'm going to add to those areas as well, just to darken them. I'm really just going to do the bottom and the sides of those pieces of wood, just to make them a little darker. Now that those lines are in there, it's just going to soften those up a little bit more. But I like a deep color on those, on the wood itself. It's already starting to take shape and come to life, I think. And you don't have to be this detailed. I kind of sometimes tend to get a little carried away. So you can do as much or as little of this as you want. I just tend to really go in to these paintings and really get a little crazy. So if you don't want to add the wood, you don't have to. If you want to just paint it a certain color, you can do that. This is your painting, so you really should do whatever it is that you want to do. I find painting is very relaxing for me, so that's why I tend to spend a little more time on the little details. Now I'm just darkening those panes in once again, or the sides of those window panes. I really want them to be dark. Okay, so now we're going to move on, and I'm going to grab my Molotow art masking fluid pen, and I'm going to just cover up this frame with some masking fluid, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to color in the windows, and then we're going to stamp a tree into the background, into the window. So I don't want the tree or anything else to go over these lines that I just spent so much time doing. So I'm just brushing this masking fluid on. It goes on very, very easily. You do need to make sure that your painting is good and dry before you put the masking fluid over it, because you don't want, if you don't, then it'll just rip your paper. And actually I'll show you that, a little mistake that I made, because I didn't let a certain area dry before I put the masking fluid on it. But this is a great, quick and easy way to mask off areas of your painting that you want to protect. So you're probably going to need, once you put it on, you need to let it dry fully. So probably just a couple minutes, maybe like 5 minutes, and it's usually pretty dry. If you just touch it, you can tell if it's dry, if it's sticky. But you do want to make sure that's going to dry. So now I'm coming in now. I'm not going to touch this masking fluid because it's not dry. So I'm going to come in now with my big brush and I'm going to just do a small background around this window. And I'm making sure to be very careful not to touch that masking fluid. I'm kind of going right up near it, but not so close that it's going to touch it so that it will dry. I'm impatient, so I don't want to wait. I want to do other things. So I'm just putting a little bit of a background because this is an outside window looking in. I don't want it to just be floating out there, so I like to kind of give it a little bit of color so that it looks like it's on a wall, maybe a stucco wall. I did another one that I'll show you on the card that I actually drew lines so it looks like it's on a sided house or a wood house. So you can do whatever you want for this background. I just put down some African violet and now I'm just going in and sopping some of the water up to give it a little texture with my paper towel. And then I'll add some more water and sop some of that up. I'm just trying to get a really light textured look around the window. Because I am going to put some greens in here. So I don't want it to be too dark that they're not going to show up. I just want a little bit of color around the window. And while I'm doing this, it'll give that masking fluid some time to dry. I think I'm just getting rid of some of those hard edges by adding some water along the edge and then drying it up with my paper towel. So now we're going to move on and I'm going to take my vine here and I'm just going to ink up the bottom or the top of it with my pine green. And I'm going to stamp it 3 or 4 times here. Just around this little window box so that I'm going to leave plenty of room for my tree in the window. So I'm going to start on the left hand side and then I'm going to move over to the right hand side. And now I'm just putting a little bit on the top there where I left off the top of that window box. I just want to put some foliage in there so that it looks full and it doesn't look weird because it doesn't have a cover on it. Because I really wanted these greens to overflow. So I'm just stamping away with my foliage. I can always come back and add more. So I tend to put some in and then I'll soften the lines and then decide if I need more to make it look fuller. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to go in. Oh, maybe not. Guess I needed a few more in the front. So now I'm going to go in with my water and I'm just going to touch each of those little blooms, that little foliage. I'm just going to touch them. I'm not using a ton of water here. I want to soften them, but I want to maintain the integrity of those little leaves so that you can tell that they're leaves. And I'm not coloring them in fully. I'm leaving white space in between. You want to make sure you do that, which is why I did my background first, because it would be very hard if I didn't put my background in first to get the color in between those leaves, and then it would be white as opposed to the background, which is purple. So I tend to do that in my paintings. Like if I'm doing a sky that's going to come behind a house, I'll put my sky in first, and then I'll stamp over the sky, my trees and stuff like that. So that way it's a little more cohesive. So I'm just touching all of these little leaves just to soften them up. And it really brings the color right out too when you add the water to the stamped image. Well, looks like I got a little too much water, but That's okay. I'll just sop it up with my brush and move it around. Just checking to see if that window frame is dry yet. And it seems that it is. So now I'm putting some brilliant yellow on my palette because I'm gonna actually color in those window panes with some yellow, because I'm gonna stamp the tree right over it, and I want the house to have it glow like you're looking into a warm room. So I'm just kind of throwing some color into the corners of those panes right now. Because when I stamp my tree over it, and I'm gonna leave some, just like I did here with the purple, I'm gonna leave some white space, so I want there to be a hint of yellow in those spaces, so it doesn't look like it's out of place. So I'm coloring those in pretty completely, and that'll give that time to dry, and I'll move on, and I'm gonna put in the branches into my window box outside. And that way you'll be able to see the tree in the window, and then the window box will have some nice sprigs and some red and Christmassy stuff. So I'm inking up the stamp with two colors. So I'm using the sepia on the branch, and I'm using English red on the berries. This is such a fun project. I might use this again and do the window box where it's actually full of snow. That's another way you could use it too. So now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to soften up. I'm not going to do anything with the branches themselves. I'm actually just going in and touching the little berries, the little red berries, to bring them out a little bit. Decided I was going to do my tree first. So there's the top of the tree. And as you can see, there's my mistake. For some reason, that little part wasn't dry, and when I stamped the top of the pine tree, the stamp actually pulled some of the masking fluid off. So I just covered it back up, and then remembered that I wanted to put ornaments on this tree as well. So I'm going to go in and put some of that Molotow masking fluid in some areas where I'm going to want ornaments to sit. And this way those areas won't get covered up with green, because it'll be very hard if I didn't do this to put ornaments on the tree because the green is so dark. So now I put a little bit more masking fluid, so now I need to let that dry. So I sped through the drying process, and now I'm just inking up my fur, and I'm going to stamp it a bunch of times in the window. And I'm going right over that masking fluid, because what we're going to do is I'm going to take my adhesive eraser and I'm going to get rid of all of those lines, all of that masking fluid, and all you'll see are the wood and then the tree behind the window. This masking fluid is so awesome. It's great to use for snow, anything you want to use, anything you want to do to cover up and protect parts of your painting. Bonnie Krebs has some great videos using masking fluid. But I'm just going in and putting in some red berries all over the place, just to give it more of a little Christmassy, festive look. And I'm not even going to touch those with water. I'm just going to leave them the way they are. So now I'm just making sure that that tree is dry. And what I'm doing it with the paper towel is I'm just kind of rubbing or dabbing off the color off of those masking fluid lines. So that way when I come in here with my eraser, I'm not getting the green on my eraser and then inadvertently smearing it somewhere I don't want it. So I just kind of dabbed it off the masking fluid. So now I'm just taking this eraser and getting rid of that, all that masking fluid, which I should have gone in and softened my tree before I took the masking fluid off. I didn't do that the way I should have done that. And if you can see right now on the wood, I actually I must have put it on when it was a little bit wet. So I pulled some of the color off of the wood. So I'm just going to go in right now with some color off my palette and just go in and fix that. It's not a big deal. I just need to paint some color back onto it. And I guess I'm going to put some more on some of the, just to darken some of those areas up again. See, can't even tell. If you didn't even know it was there, you'd never be able to see it. So now I'm just darkening up a little bit more of this wood and some of those shadows again. Watercolor tends to lighten up after it dries. So now I'm just using some water and I'm going to come in here very carefully and soften those the Christmas tree light lines. And I'm going to try to be careful to go around where I had left some of those white spaces for my Christmas ornament or my Christmas ornaments or my lights, whatever you want to call them. And I want to make sure I don't touch the wood frame either. So I'm just coming along here, just softening those lines. Now I'll come in with my red marker and I'm just gonna put in some of those ornaments, lights, whatever you want to call them. I wanted it to just really pop out as a Christmas tree. Okay, now I'm just going to sign it. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you want to subscribe to my channel, please click on the subscribe button here to the left. If you want to see some other videos that I've done, I'll link them here below. And I'd love for you to come over and check out my blog. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a great day.